Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing the new expansion for Expeditions, Gears of Corruption. Expeditions was one of my favorite games of 2023, and Gears of Corruption is adding a few new things to the game, and we're first going to talk about all those things that are added, and then tell you my thoughts and opinions on those things. But as a general idea, before we get into that, just a quick 30-60 seconds on what Expeditions is. Expeditions is an efficiency game. It's a game which you are trying to move your mechs around the map, slowly move them around the board, in order to uncover various areas and slowly basically get these goals over here. These goals are going to be one of the things that contribute to your score at the end of the game. The game end is going to be triggered by a player getting 4 of these goals, any player one getting 4 of these different goals, and you're going to be using your actions to move, play, and gather cards. So to move around the board, to play cards, and to gather from those locations, trying to find the right combinations of how to build up your card engine as you gather various items, you upgrade some items, you're going to be meld some meteorites, and you're going to be going on quests and solving some quests. You're going to be doing all of that, trying to get to as many points as possible, more efficiently, better and faster than the other players. That's a very, very high level. You can watch my full review, you can watch a gameplay on the channel, you can go to a variety of other channels and see more information, but let's talk about what Gears of Corruption does for the game. And it basically adds a few new things. The first thing it adds is a 6th player. Now, I will note, first of all, let's say off the bat, that, and I guess, let's do opinions after. Let's just talk about what it adds right now, and let's do opinions after. So it adds a 6th player. That's going to be one of the things it adds. You have a new green color over here. Speaking of which, you have some upgraded components over here. You're going to have these silicone little melds instead of the original base game had these plastic melds. These ones over here that, clink together, whatnot, over there. These are going to be silicone melds that slightly better adhere to the various mechs. It's a small quality of life upgrade, but nothing particularly crazy. I'm diving into opinions again. We're going to have silicone melds over here as an upgraded component. You're going to have dual layer player boards. All the player boards for the mechs from the base game have all been upgraded to these dual layer ones. You have these originals over here. You can see the difference as far as those little divots and the way these are structured. So to hold on to everything there, has dual layers over there. So just enhanced component upgrades on both of those. You're going to have some new content as well. You're going to have new cards for the various factions. So you're going to start off, you're going to be selecting different cards that give you your assigned mech faction. You can go ahead and gather that way. And it gives you variable starting resources as well. Part of that's just in general to start your resources. And part of that is if you're playing at higher player counts, it'll give you a little bit of a head start so you're not spending as much time gathering everything. You start off with a few basic resources to begin the game. You're also going to have new content in the shape of 2 new mechs to deal with. We're going to have these 2 factions over here, the Scarecrow and the Mole, as 2 different new mechs. I will note over here, I should have noticed at the beginning, but right now over here on the table, I do have the Ironclad edition of Expeditions, both for the base game and the expansion, which primarily means these metal mechs over here. So if you are someone who's looking at Expeditions, please note that there are 2 versions of the game, both with and without metal mechs. Just make sure you're buying the right one, the one that you're looking for. The Ironclad will obviously cost more, but will come with premium upgrades from metal mechs, some coins, things like that. I think it comes with the coins. I'm not entirely sure if they're bought separately, but I believe it comes with the coins. Anyways, past that over here, so we have these new mechs. So we have the mech, this can be the Mole. The Mole's ability is whenever you gather, you may trash a map to act as if corruption is not covering a benefit. A core concept in Expeditions is going to be corruption covering locations. You can go ahead and trash a map to ignore those limitations, which gives you less of a rush to try to solve it, vanquish all the corruption, but rather you can dance around it with those maps instead. And then we have the Scarecrow over here. The Scarecrow is going to, whenever you finish a refresh turn, you may trash a map to perform an extra action, move, play, or gather, basically meaning that, assuming you have the maps for it, your refresh turns cost you nothing, because normally a refresh turn costs you 1 action because it costs you a turn, but your next turn you get a full action back. With the Scarecrow, your refresh turns cost you nothing, giving you more flexibility over how and where you go ahead and deal with those refresh turns throughout the game, utilizing the best combination of cards, because you're not really losing anything, unless of course you have another way to trade in maps, in which case that's a different story. You're also going to have a new wild worker. Basically, the game starts off with giving you a little gold worker that's going to be a wild worker for each faction. So that gives you just a little bit of a head start going on. You're not completely restricted as far as needing to get a worker round 1 to maximize your card play. We'll talk more about this in my thoughts, but I like that one a lot. And then you're also going to have new map tokens. Basically, these map tokens in the original game were tokens that you just got the map token. They were helpful for achieving 5 map tokens for one of these goals, and then sometimes you had ways of trading them in. But now, when you flip over a map token, you also get a benefit. So in this case, you're going to get one of the cards on the table that has a quest, and if that wasn't there, you wouldn't get anything, unfortunately. But you have all these quest tokens that these map tokens, that as you explore, there's more of an incentive to wander around the board to open things up, because you're going to be getting all these tokens that as an extra benefit. So whatever incentive there was to explore or not, there's just that much more so now. And then lastly, because these have all been these small little peripheral things, we have new upgraded components, we have a 6th player, we have small modifications to the gameplay. But the biggest thing is going to be, well, I say biggest thing, but the biggest change, so to speak, is going to be the concept of an automated mech. This is going to be a AI opponent against you in the game. The basic idea is that once a player gets their first star, in the game, they've accomplished one of these goals, you're going to go ahead and gather these cards over here, these automated mech things. You're going to choose a random, unselected mech. It doesn't really matter which sculpt you take, although that could be a fun variation, but right now it's just any mech that you have, you put it on the board, and you're going to go ahead and put 5 cards into play, representing, let me lay this out properly, representing the mech's strength, and then slowly but surely, here, let's go and put 5 cards out. When it comes right back to the player, right before the player who activated the mech for the first turn, that mech is going to start taking its own turn. The way it works, let's grab a mech and start putting on the board. We have this new mech over here. It's going to go on the board, and on the mech's turn, right before the player who brought it into play for the first time, you're going to put out a new card, and that tells you where the mech goes. In this case, it's going northeast, where it can't go, so it's slowly going to wander until it finds a side that it can go, and then wander that way. And additionally, well, let's go ahead and play out another card. Let's pretend we have this mech over here and this mech over here, because on the mech's next turn, it's going to try to go northeast, where it can't go, but it hits this guy, causing them to lose 1 strength. You're going to look at the card, and the card will tell you what consequence it has. When it goes, it can't go, but it still will continue trying to go until it can go over here, but its next move wants it to go there, it will continue trying to go, and then it'll go over here. So basically, whenever the mech hits another player, it'll still try to move, but it'll cause an impact to that player. Now the players, on their turn, can start using vanquish actions to get rid of the mech. A vanquish action, if you are adjacent to the mech, to the AI mech, you can use a vanquish action to go through the cards, working your way from bottom to top, trying to basically take it out, and these cards will count as vanquish tokens for the sake of, well, again, being worth 2 points each, and this requirement over here that has 7 vanquish tokens. And so that's basically what the expansion adds. Adds a bunch of new modules and things and small tweaks and fixes and component upgrades, and then it adds this automated mech to fight against as well that will both hurt the other players and give you a way to use your vanquish action against that mech. Which means it's time to dive into thoughts and opinions of what the expansion does, what it adds to expeditions, and all of those things. And so let's tackle those things one at a time. First of all, going through the 6-player expansion, I find that for me, Expeditions is a game that I love at 2, 3, and 4 players. 4 players base game already had the slight limitation that you couldn't get a work on your first turn necessarily. Honestly, even 3 players depending on the configuration of the starting tiles. And 5 players was easily my least favorite way to play Expeditions. So for me, 6 players, frankly, I haven't played it at 6. I don't plan on playing it at 6. For me, 5 players is already pushing it. I appreciate the flexibility that it provides, but for me, it's not something that I'll benefit from because I already think 5 players is the worst. Now again, full clarity and whatnot, they are adding new starting components from a new worker as well as new resources, so there is that aspect to take into account, but I just don't anticipate 6 players being something I'm going to use or benefit from, although having green as a player color, that's something you can use and benefit from. Past that, as far as the upgraded components, these silicone little molds that just rolled off the table over there. These silicone little molds over here, they are nice, but I never had a problem with the old ones, so no real complaints on my end. I like these, but again, no personal complaints on the original ones for me. I assumed these were to address some degree of complaints, but I just didn't have those, so I can't really comment on what these are adding for me. The new dual layer player boards, on the other hand, that's a nice quality of life upgrade. They took all the original player boards from the base game, they made them all dual layer, they added the new ones. That is just a strong quality of life upgrade, although it does make it interesting. If they ever plan on releasing new mechs, I wonder how they'll approach that, because unless you want to reprint them all again, you might force a player to have new boards somewhere. Either way, that's a future problem. I won't worry about that for now, but I will say I do like the dual layer player boards. It's a nice benefit. It's not, I never had huge problems with the old one, but certainly did knock pieces here and there, and this is just better in that sense. I will say that the 2 biggest things that I really like is I like the map tokens and the new wild worker. The map tokens give you more incentive to explore in a game where I found that I personally rarely bothered exploring. I let other players explore while I worked on building up my engine, gathering cards, things like that. All things you can do on these basic starting cards, I never needed to explore, and I kind of, unless there's one mech that benefits from having map tokens, if I wasn't playing that mech, I personally left exploring to other players, and this gives you an additional incentive to explore, which I appreciate. It looks like they are addressing the fact that there's less reward otherwise. You go ahead and just get the guaranteed thing instead of the unknown. And so I really like the map tokens. I think those are a very solid addition to the game. And more importantly, the new wild worker, where every faction starts with a worker, I think that is huge. The biggest complaint I've had against Expeditions, and I love it despite it, but the biggest complaint I have had is that in a 3 or 4 player game, and again, 3 depends, 4 for sure, and 5 for sure, you have at least some players who will not get a worker on their first turn, and as much as Stormlight Games has commented that they've balanced it around this, and as much as I've won as the last player, I've won 4 player games as the 4th player, it's definitely happened, nonetheless, I do find that not getting a worker early on can be incredibly frustrating and can feel like it's limiting your engine a lot, and so I appreciate having that new wild worker in play. I think I left out one thing as far as the new content. There's also, I left out one thing, but we'll talk about it. Let's talk about the new content to that end. New content, we have 2 new mechs and we have 4 new pairs of faction leaders. So the 2 new mechs over here, 4 new sets of leaders over here. Generally when you start the game, you're going to pick a companion and a character. And over here we have all the ones in the base game, and here we have new ones over here. They just add more variability. So going to my, I guess now that we've told you those exist, let's talk about my thoughts on the new content as far as that. I think the 2 new mechs are fun. Both of them give you a way to trade in map tokens for different things. They're not necessarily my favorites. My personal favorite mechs and expeditions, if you've played it, are going to be the one that lets you get cards straight into your hand, so you can start using those cards right away. Love that mech. And then the mech that lets you have 5 of everything. Getting 5 meteorites melded, you can get so many points. It's so satisfying. The new mechs give you ways to avoid different things. You get an extra action back when you refresh, but I don't find I refresh a lot because I usually like getting a lot of cards. Or you have a new is discarding map token to ignore a benefit, to ignore a restriction, and bypass a limitation. That can get you a lot of return at different points in the game depending how you utilize it. Not necessarily my favorite ability. I like having more abilities. I like having more mechs. I like the variety it adds, but I guess I'm not like overly enthused with the abilities of the new one, so take it or leave it. Not, again, it might sound too harsh. It's more content. I'm happy for it, but they don't replace my favorite mechs. But then we have the new character combinations, and those are pretty nice, with the caveat that they're not necessarily game-breaking or completely changing of the game. What they do is they offer 4 new characters, 4 new ways of combining starting abilities. Some of them are more different than others. All of them represent a nice shift from the base ones of the base game characters, so you have a little bit more variability in what they do. Some of them let you sweep cards. This alien one over here, we have Balion and Zephion over here. They completely change the way you interact with the game. You're no longer really solving quests or vanquishing the way you typically do. They completely adjust. They're kind of just placing quests instead, but you have to give up a corruption to do so, or alternatively you can go ahead and just take corruption off locations. So they totally change the way you play the game in very different ways. So I will say these new characters do represent a nice shift from the base game, while at the same time, again, I don't know if it's game breaking in any way. They're just nice to have. And then lastly, the automated mech. The automated AI mech that you're fighting against, it's fine. I think it's okay. For me, I found that it probably added more maintenance to the game than actually having a rewarding experience. I think it is more helpful at higher player counts, especially just to have more vanquishing on the board. If you're playing a 5-player game or now a 6-player game, you're going to run out of those vanquish tokens pretty quickly, and so having a bunch of extra things to vanquish, that's certainly a good thing to do. I would say that in general, even though boards do clear up as you go through it, I don't know if I felt that need, and the threat wasn't as present or as damaging as all that, and so for me, the new mech kind of felt more like maintenance than anything else. I don't mind it. I'd happily play with it. I'd happily play without it. It was kind of neutral for me. So where are we on this expansion, on my ratings for this, on final thoughts and all that? Because and I want to be very clear here. There's something new that I've been doing, which is now when I review expansions, I try to review the expansion in terms of not just how I feel with the game, because to me, Expeditions is a 5 out of 5. I love Expeditions, and the expansion doesn't make any of that worse. So historically, I would have been like, I don't know, 5 out of 5, I guess, because it makes the game just as good, if not better, and it does make the game better. But now I'm rating expansions more on how I feel they add to the base game. So even though Expeditions is a 5 out of 5 game for me, and even though the expansion does make some elements better, the expansion to me is not a 5 out of 5. The expansion to me is a 3.5 out of 5. It does some really nice things that I do recommend. I think that having an extra worker to start the game off, that's huge. I love that difference, although frankly, you can house rule that in your original Expeditions game and just give everyone a worker color of their choice. It basically will do the same thing, so I highly recommend taking that approach if you want to. If you don't want to get the expansion to fix that problem, just go ahead and do that. The map tokens, not much you can do there unless you get creative. The map tokens here, you'll want to get those map tokens. I think that's a nice quality of life as far as exploration, and I think the new characters, the new mechs, the new cars, all of those things are nice. The automated mech, kind of like the main difference, that's the biggest mechanical change to Expeditions, and for me, the automated mech is just okay. It's not bad, it's not whatever. I assume I will play with it in the future, and I assume there'll be plenty of games where I don't bother playing with it. And so for me, Expeditions Gears of Corruption is a 3.5. I think there's some nice solid changes that are quality of life improvements on Expeditions, but it almost feels more like a update pack with a few extra things thrown in than an actual fully blown expansion. I think it's good. I do recommend getting it if you like Expeditions, but I also think if you like Expeditions the way it is, I don't think it's an essential expansion. I think it's a nice quality of life upgrade with a central mechanic that is kind of take it or leave it, and a bunch of other things that do enhance your overall gameplay experience, from components to small rules adjustments or tweaks in the game. Anyways, that's my review of Expedition Gears of Corruption, a pretty decent expansion to a really great game that does make the really great game better, but not necessarily as much as I would have hoped. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.